Welcome to the Plone Podcast. And today we're going to be talking with the president of the Plone Foundation, Chrissy Wainwright, who's also a senior developer at 6 Feet Up, a Python and cloud consulting company based out of Indianapolis, but with people all over not quite all over the world, but on several continents. And so we're here to talk to Chrissy about all things Plone and outside of Plone. I've always been a little curious about Chrissy's background because I met her probably in 2008 with several of the other crew at 6 Feet Up. And she, when I met her, she just it felt to me like she was already part of the 6 Feet Up team, but she apparently hadn't been there that long. But in the short few years afterwards, when we were participating in a lot of Plone symposia, I just kept seeing Chrissy coming up and being a trainer or a speaker. And so she was she was a fixture in the Plone world. And now she's the Plone Foundation President. She has been. This is her second term. And so, Chrissy, can you tell me what about your background led you to Plone?
Well, nothing specifically led me to Plone. I got into Plone because of 6 Feet Up. I was towards the end of 2007, and I was looking for a new job. I was working from home at that time for a company in Central Illinois, doing website development for them, but nothing. Not Python, it was just mostly a static website that I was working on. And I wanted to change it up and found 6 Feet Up. And so I didn't have a choice with Plone.
I mean, do we really ever? So I kind of heard a hint of the story. I think did you work remotely that entire time, or did you move to join?
No, not entirely. Yeah, we lived in Central Illinois, and I started the job there, and no one was really working from home at that time. So once we knew we were going to move to Indiana, I went to my bosses and said, "Hey, I'm going to be moving away. I'm giving my 2 weeks notice." And they came back the next day and were like, "Hey, how would you like working from home?" I was like, "Well, we can try it."
Wow.
And
so
it worked out pretty well.
My gosh. So that's the start of 6 Feet Up's remote work culture.
Yeah. So then when, we moved to Indiana, and I worked physically in the office for 3 years. And when I knew that eventually we were going to be moving to New Hampshire at that point, I took Gab and our HR person into a room at that time and said, "Hey, we're going to be moving. Can I work remotely when that happens?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure. Absolutely."
That sounds a little threatening. It sounds like you closed the door and something happened and magically you had your way.
Well, I wasn't quite announcing that I was to everyone that I was moving yet. So it was just kind of like a meeting off to the side, like, "Hey, here's kind of what's going on in my life and what we're looking at doing."
So when you first started working at 6 Feet Up, you were just they said, "We're working with Plone. Here's what you need to learn how to do." Is that how you got introduced to it?
Yeah, they needed a template developer. So the guy that they had that was doing the templates, the HTML and CSS and JavaScript, he was going to be leaving the company. And so he was leaving on a Friday. I interviewed on Monday. They offered me the job that day, but I didn't start until Thursday. So I worked with the guy for 2 days and kind of started picking things up. I'd also never used version control before that. So using Subversion at that time was completely new to me as well. And the idea of a content management system. So I had a lot to learn right away.
2007. So that would have been Plone 3 something, right?
Plone 3.0 or 3.1.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those were exciting years for Plone. Well, it's not like they're not exciting anymore, but so because when I met you, so it would have been 2008, you were already established as a template developer, and you were already giving presentations and talks about how to theme Plone and how to create.
2009 was my first talk that I gave at the Plone Symposium.
Okay.
So I was only into it about a little over a year at that point.
I remember shortly after Penn State, Penn State had the Plone Symposia East from 2008 to 2012. And I picked up the Plone Symposium, renamed it Plone Symposium Midwest, because we're not Oshkosh, right? And then 2013, I remember thinking, okay, we got to get Chrissy here to give training on Plone theming. And so I remember it was the first year we held it here on campus. We had a brand new building that we were hosting the symposium in. And I remember walking into your classroom just to see how things were going. And you had everybody sitting there. Everyone was busy, focused. And I just remember thinking you were emanating an aura of just calm competence, which you've always done. That to me is like a strong memory. So it's really cool that you were already doing that teaching. Have you had teaching experience like before that?
No, not really. My degree is actually called Instructional Technology and Telecommunications. So I learned how to use different types of multimedia for instructional purposes, but like it wasn't like actively teaching.
So it would have been in support of, to help others use that technology.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I'm interested also in your background before you became a programmer. Was there something in your background, like were you interested in technology or gadgets, electronics when you were a kid?
Oh yeah. Especially once the internet came around and I had a computer. Once I was on the internet, I remember learning HTML and figuring out how to make a table and throw in some MIDIs. For the longest time, I didn't think that's what I'd end up doing. I didn't think I'd end up programming or anything like that. I was interested in meteorology, like I wanted to chase tornadoes. Also music. For a while, I wanted to be a music producer, learn how to use the giant soundboard and do all that.
Of course. Also very technological, right?
Yeah.
So were you, okay, I'm curious. What was your first computer?
Oh, I don't know. I think it was like maybe a Compudyne. That's what it was called. It's like some off-brand type thing.
Wow. Never
Not anything I had a choice, and it was, something that someone gave to us.
That's cool. And then when you were, okay, do you remember the first browser that you used? Which one would that have been?
Probably would have been Internet Explorer.
Oh.
Because that's what was on the computer.
Ah, okay. Oh, so it was a Windows PC kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. All right. I guess I should be more gracious to Microsoft. I mean, I have to go like, okay, it's not the 90s. It's okay to talk about Microsoft without gritting one's teeth.
I mean, I had experience around Macs as well. My grandfather owned a print shop, and so they had Macintosh computers for working with the designs of what they were printing.
Going back to, you mentioned meteorology. You were interested in meteorology because I think storms are a big part of life in central Illinois.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And my parents did ham radio. And so the ham radio club they were a part of every year would have a storm spotting class, because then, they were ones that were able to go out and spot storms. So I was always part of that class every year, learning how to spot them. And I still remember a lot of that.
Ham radio, that's really neat. Do you still do any ham radio?
No, I got a novice license at one time, but around that time was when cell phones were getting to be popular. And so my family switched to those instead.
What is the kind of training that somebody needs for storm chasing or watching out for storms?
Well, we had a meteorologist that came and did a class once a year, kind of like a refresher every year, that talked about, just what to watch in the cloud formations, what to expect of where the hail and the rain are, and paying attention to things like that, looking for a wall cloud.
That sounds like something everybody in the Midwest should go through.
Yeah, probably.
I got to tell you, when I moved to Oshkosh, I was like, oh my gosh, look at the storms that are going north and south of here. Fortunately, not usually through Oshkosh. Wow. Huh. Well, so you've always had a technological bent, and I hope you'll forgive me for asking this, but usually guys are kind of mean to women who are technologically interested, and we've seen there are all sorts of ways that women are discouraged from joining a technology field. Have you ever felt anything like that?
No, I never have. Either I've completely ignored it or I didn't notice it, or I've been really lucky and not run into any of that.
So one of your hobbies, I guess pastimes, is your training for the ninja competition, and it's a very physical endeavor. I mean, it's amazing. I've seen some of the videos you've shared about the things you have to train to do, climbing. It's amazingly physical and kind of grueling, really. And I wonder, I'm a little afraid of you because I kind of wonder what sort of things are going on in your head that you're willing to put yourself through this sort of thing. Can you tell me more about the ninja competition?
Yeah, I do it for fun. So really, I started climbing about 10 years ago, just because we moved somewhere that was really close to a climbing gym, something I was always interested in. Like I would climb the trees around our house as a kid. So having an actual gym for this was awesome. And I've always done it for fun. I've done some competitions, but it's not anything like I travel to go do. It's really just for fun. Around that time, also American Ninja Warrior, the TV show, came out, and watching that and just thinking like, oh, I bet I could do a lot of that stuff. But, never really had the opportunity until about 3 years ago was when the Ninja Gym opened up here in the area. And so I started going. And I mean, yeah, you can call it training, but I'm not actively doing anything like CrossFit or anything like that. I just go in and I play around on the obstacles and I have fun.
How often do you go?
I go to the climbing gym once a week and the Ninja Gym once a week.
Well, only basically you're doing this only twice a week, but you've achieved a level of fitness that is pretty darn remarkable.
Yeah, I'm at each gym for 2 hours.
Wow. That's some really good time management. That's I'm thinking like, okay, my schedule, family, work and everything else. That shows some serious focus and intention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the climbing gym, I'll go like Monday or Tuesday nights after I've put my kid to bed. So then I'm not having, I'm not out at the gym while I could be spending time with him.
That reminds me, I remember in 2013, and I've mentioned this to you maybe once before, that I remember you brought your son with you when he was basically a little bit bigger than a baby to the Plone Symposium here in Oshkosh, and your mom came and took care of him for you while you were teaching. I thought that was fantastic that you felt free enough to be able to do that, and I think you had a good time, and your mom did, and your son did. Well, if he remembers any of it.
Yeah, he doesn't remember any of that. But it was really nice since we were living in New Hampshire at the time. My parents are in Illinois. So yeah, my mom definitely took the opportunity to drive up to be able to watch him. And since he wasn't 2 years old yet, he flew for free.
Oh yeah, right. At that time, because there were several people from quite a few, I think everybody from 6 Feet Up or close to it came up from Indianapolis to Oshkosh. Did you guys rent a house in Oshkosh for that? Because that's what 6 Feet Up usually does.
Usually, yeah, but no, we stayed in that dorm.
Right. That was a brand new dorm. Horizon Village. That's right. That was a nice thing to be able to get people into.
Yeah, it was a nice area. I know Calvin really enjoyed having the social area. He made crepes and played music.
I remember that. Those were good crepes. That's right. We pretty much had the floor to ourselves because
no one else was there.
Yeah, that was the steam shutdown week. Okay, this is all sorts of weird, arcane knowledge of what goes into planning I guess a week-long event on a campus. Those good memories. Okay, so I think people are really curious to know what it's like to be on the Plone Foundation board, but also what it's like to be the president. What sort of challenges have you had as president? Well, first tell us what does being Plone Foundation president mean?
Like what the job entails or what it means to me?
Sure. Both.
I mean, as far as what it entails, for the most part, it's running the board meetings, putting together the agenda, making sure that we discuss and take care of any action items that we have to take care of. Last year, though, also we took over the planning for the Plone conference. So I would say, yeah, that would definitely fit under my challenges. Yeah, having the conference, having to deal with COVID, of course, none of that was expected.
So when you have to prepare the agenda and you're thinking about the most important things that need to be addressed, plus handling incoming items that have popped up, because that's what happens in a software community. Do you feel that the EOS training, I guess the EOS process, the enterprise, is it entrepreneurial operating system that we use at 6 Feet Up, do you think that that's helped you prepare for being president?
Maybe a little bit. I mean, I don't actively use any of the EOS processes for the meetings, but yeah, maybe just having that idea. I mean, really, as far as being president, I'm following what Paul Rowland has done, because he was always the president for me. And I'm glad that he's still on the board, because you can always fall back on him. He remembers all the little things of how everything should work.
The context and the history of what happened that led to a particular set of choices or decisions. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In addition to having to organize an online conference last year, what were some of the other challenges that you faced?
I mean, we've been working also on getting the Zope Foundation members moved over. I mean, that process, well, the members are over, but like getting all of the Zope pieces over, that's still not all the way complete as far as, you know, we would like, but just having to coordinate with the different people and making sure that everything is lined up and moved over the way that it needs to be.
The one part that I'm sort of more in touch with is the membership of the security team, because Plone has a security team. It's been running for, well, as long as I've known Plone. And we needed to merge in some members who knew Zope, who could act as essentially the people responsible for incorporating or identifying security issues with Zope. So that was one of the teams that needed to be kind of have its membership added to with Zope people. Are there other teams that Zope members are being actively added to?
Not that I can remember off the top of my head. I mean, we do consider Zope themselves to be a team, as a part of the Plone community.
Right. And maybe for people who are listening, they don't know exactly why the Zope Foundation is being brought under the Plone Foundation. Would you care to explain that a little bit more?
If I can remember all the details, I'm sure there are a lot of details I don't know or can't remember, but yeah, so Plone is built on top of Zope. Zope at one time was it's just its own thing, managed by the Zope Corporation. And they had their own board of directors, they were their own separate entity, and Plone always kind of worked on top of Zope. But, eventually the Zope Corporation, doesn't exist anymore. The board of directors stopped meeting. And so the whole thing has just kind of become defunct. And so, at the Plone community built on top of Zope, we can't see that happen. We needed the Zope bits, especially when we needed to move everything to Python 3. So, people in the Plone community have really taken over and especially helped to push some of the Zope people, saying, okay, let's get this moving forward. Let's get it on Python 3, because that's going to ensure the success of Plone in the future. Otherwise, it's hard to tell what would have happened to Plone. I know we had decided, like, okay, if we need to, we'll take the repositories, we'll fork them, we'll do our own thing. And fortunately, people in the Zope community have been helping with the process too. But still, since there's no Zope Corporation or board of directors, we want to ensure the success of Plone. And so we're taking basically the Zope people under the Plone umbrella.
And I think some of that is due to the fact that the IRS, which is the tax service in the United States government, has made it really hard to create new software conservancy foundations like Plone Foundation. So Plone Foundation is officially registered as technically the 501c3, a type of a nonprofit foundation with the IRS. And we've heard that it's basically impossible for new 501c3s to get created. I think in part because some for-profit companies were creating these nonprofit corporations or entities and then channeling tons of marketing money into them, making it really hard for anybody else to prove legitimacy. So I think that's one of the reasons why it was not necessarily the Zope Foundation issue, but say Guillotina being added into the Plone Foundation, and then potentially other tools, other frameworks that we're kind of connected to through history. We've looked at maybe finding ways of incorporating their project under the Plone Foundation umbrella too. And it's kind of exciting to see that Plone has been so established. I believe the Plone Foundation was one of the earliest such conservancies. 2004, I think, was when it was created, something like that.
Around 2006, maybe.
Oh, okay. And then since then, it's been an idea that's caught on. So I guess you probably can't reveal it yet, but for this year, the Plone Conference, I know that with COVID being an issue, there's some concern about whether or not an in-person conference can happen this year. And we have heard that there's another software project that had planned a hybrid event, but then there was a lot of pushback because COVID is still predicted to be an issue. And so that event, I think, had to change its plans and go entirely online. Do you see a place for, assuming that we hopefully get out of COVID, the COVID problem that we have right now, do you see that hybrid events are a thing that we should focus on trying to do for conferences like that or for sprints?
Yeah, we're definitely going to try. We realize that we're not going to be able to completely integrate the people who are there in person with the people online. So it's almost, there will be need to be separate events because there will still be in person, like the Plone party, that it's going to be hard for people online to participate with, but maybe have a separate thing that only between the people who are online. So at least they can talk to each other and feel like they're part of the event.
That's reminding me a little bit of a thing that you and I did, although on opposite sides of the Atlantic. In 2015, I was in Sorrento for the Plone Open Garden, and you were at PyCon. Was it in Montreal?
Yeah.
And I remember we were trying, we on our end at the hotel. I mean, the hotel has a good internet connection, but not out in the pool deck. Yeah, because see, our Plone sprints are really rough events. Like we hang out in pool decks in Europe, but and we were trying to find ways of getting 4G data out in the pool deck, and the Wi-Fi wasn't working. And I think you were running at PyCon trying to set up something on your end, and we got a big group thing happening between everybody who's in Sorrento and the crew in Montreal and PyCon. Mm-hmm. That was a lot of fun. I kind of wonder if we're thinking about the Plone party, for example. Yes, it's going to be hard to have people virtually join a party, but having kind of a booth like that where people can just drop by at the party and talk to people who are online doing their thing too, that could be fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we want to make sure everyone is included as much as possible. We don't know what's going to happen for this year's conference yet. At this point, we're still going to try to do it in person, but we realize it might only be the Europeans that are able to attend, and then everyone else will have to be on the online portion. At least, fortunately, with the setup that we've got, we can have everyone online watching the talks at the same time that people are watching it in person.
Right. So, okay, I have to do the little plug. No, I don't have to. But it's okay. So LoudSwarm is the tool that 6 Feet Up created for, I guess it was hosting the Python Web Conference last year. And we use that for the Plone Conference. And it's obviously maybe a bit biased, but I feel it's a really nice tool for online events. But so something that is totally not on the books really is that we're for LoudSwarm, we're thinking, how can we incorporate new features to make it easier to have people feel like they're really part of a thing to engage them even more than they currently are with Zoom and Slack or Discord. And Calvin and I, you've seen this, we're playing with these Oculus Quest 2 headsets to see what sort of VR elements we could incorporate. It'd be kind of fun to be able to do something like that to make it a little bit more like being there in person, even though virtually.
Yeah, we played around with the new Mozilla Hubs thing the other day, and none of us were wearing a headset, but it was still, you were still able to move around in this virtual space and see each other's avatars. You couldn't, I mean, Calvin had set it up so he was sharing his video, but it wasn't quite the same as, it wasn't like Zoom. It was still in the space and like this, just this 2D video kind of floating around.
All right, I got to try that. That does sound like fun. Before, when I asked you what it meant to be Plone Foundation President, you asked if the role or for you personally. Now I'm interested. Let's hear what does it mean for you personally?
Oh, I don't know. I hate these sorts of questions, really. I don't know. It's great to see how people value me and my opinion. Really, when I joined the board, I thought I'd only be on for, I'll do this for a year or two. And going on, 6-7 years now? That
sentiment that of being valued is something that strikes a chord with me, because I felt the same way too. Actually, you and I both kind of met the Plone board as sort of an introductory, here's how the board functions, because they held that meeting to encourage others who were thinking of joining the board to see what was involved and what the duties entailed. And you and I both ended up starting on the board that year, actually. But I remember thinking, like, why would they want me on this thing? What have I, got to say that I'm suddenly thrust in the spotlight of being in a position of some responsibility? And it is a really, it is a fulfilling thing to realize that, oh, you're doing a good job. And you have been. I remember when you and I joined, I'd never worked with you before, except, when you were training and doing things where we'd meet at the Plone conferences and symposia. But I remember thinking you have a really calm way about you, very, calm, I guess, very, very focused, but analytical, and you come up with really good solutions. You have really good next step ideas. You're very organized. I think that's wonderful. Obviously, there's a need for a mixed group of people, mixed set of skills and points of view in a board or any organization, really any team. But the things that you bring to the table are just I don't even know how to call it. It's like just pragmatic, get it done, no drama. That's wonderful, because you hear stories of boards where there's drama. In fact, on the Plone board, we've heard a little bit
before we joined.
Yes.
Well, and I think that's contributed to my longevity as well, is that we haven't had drama. You look at the people that were on the board, around 2010, just around those years, and people were swapping out quite a bit. But now you look at the last few years, and it's been a lot of the same people. I mean, we don't have any plans of taking over or anything. It's just, I know we're happy to serve the community and to work together to do that.
So I remember probably it was in Tokyo in 2018, the conference in Tokyo, which you were able to come to, which was a lot of fun. I was going to say something about it, but I want to hear a little bit more. And I think others want to hear a bit more about your adventures getting to Tokyo that year.
What part of it?
Well, I think other than it was a DC conference in 2008, and then San Francisco 2011, and then Boston 2016.
And Brazil 2013.
Oh, you went to 2013. I forgot. That's right.
Yeah, because that was the one you weren't at.
I forgot. I was jealous about you about your going to that one. Okay. Well, we won't talk about 2013 Brazil.
Oh no, I've got stuff on that one too. So I wasn't sure on that one. I mean, I'd only been to the US conference at that point, and Clayton had asked me if I wanted to go. And Eli wasn't even a year old at that point. So, I was like really worried about that, about leaving him. And, I talked to my husband and he's like, well, you have the opportunity to go, just go. So I did. And yeah, that was a great conference. Hung out with Paul Everett a lot. Getting on the plane, going from Atlanta to Brasilia, I was sitting on the plane and saw him walking down the aisle like, oh. So yeah, we hung out a lot that week.
That was, I'm trying to remember, that was a combination of the Plone conference and Python conference in Brazil.
Yeah, PyCon Brazil. Mm-hmm.
And that was a really, really big event. I think it was like 400 people at least.
Yeah, maybe more than that. I remember the group picture being in the auditorium and just being huge. I mean, because the talks were separate. And I remember I tried to join some of the PyCon talks, but they didn't have a translator from Portuguese. So I mostly stuck to the Plone talks. But then for the keynotes, like we did all of the keynotes, we did all together. And they did have translators going both ways. I think most of the talks were in English, but there were one or two in Portuguese. So we did have headsets to listen.
Wow. That's an extra level of organizational requirement. Yeah. And then that was in Brasilia. Mm-hmm. And that's because I guess the entire Brazilian federal government uses Plone for its intranets and
some of their public sites.
Yeah, and then I remember the Olympics site more recently, around 2016, was using Plone for that. Then the sprint was, and I'm going to mispronounce the name of the town, the seaside town. Well, okay, I'm not even going to try. But there was the seaside sprint that was like, I was like, I really wanted to go, but did you go?
No, I don't participate in the sprints so much. I would like to, but just timing doesn't usually work out.
Yeah. If you got family at home and you've already left for a while, especially, did you provide training at that conference too?
I did.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So it's usually for me too, it's a choice of if I go and I want to do the training or participate in training, then I can't do the tail end, which is the sprints. Okay, so I'm a little less jealous of you then. I feel better. Thanks. Okay, so where I was going with this was that I thought that I'd forgotten that you'd gone to the Brazil conference because I thought you had gone only to the American conferences, but you were able to go to Tokyo, and this time you did a slightly different set of travel arrangements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did. So brought my husband with me, and since he didn't want to be like completely bored while I was doing Plone stuff during the day, we also brought one of our friends from college. And so the two of them, while I was doing Plone stuff, they would go do their own sightseeing. But I'd also scheduled a couple days before and after the conference just for Nathan and I to go around and do some sightseeing too.
That's right. And you shared some photos of some of your travels. What were one or two of the places that you visited before the conference?
We did a tour, like we were with a tour group on a bus that we went to Mount Fuji. So we went up about halfway up, and there's a stop there where they have lots of buses, and just at least you're on the mountain. You can't drive all the way to the summit for that one. And then also to Mount Hakone, which is a separate one nearby. I mean, it was a lot of different stops along the way. There was also visited a lake where we had lunch. So yeah, that was really neat. The Mount Hakone was really, I loved that one because we actually took a boat. We were on a lake and we took this boat over to where you went to the summit of the mountain, and it was like so cloudy, kind of pseudo rainy. And we get in on this tram to go up the mountain, and it's still completely cloudy, but we got up to the top and walked out to where you could see everything, and the clouds just cleared up and you could see everything. It was awesome.
Nice timing. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's wonderful that you were able to not just get to the conference yourself, but you were able to bring your husband and had a good time sightseeing first. That's an element of those conferences that I've never had the time to partake in or convince my family to come, even though that one I really wanted them to come, especially my sons, because we do judo, and so I was able to get to the Budokan, the Kodokan.
Yeah, I try to do at least some sightseeing at every conference that I go to. I didn't do so much in Brasilia just because I didn't I didn't know anything about the city beforehand. So there wasn't anything I was like really looking forward to go see. But like when the conference in DC, did some sightseeing there at the monuments. San Francisco, I really wanted to see the Golden Gate Bridge. So here's another funny story. So went with one of the guys that worked at 6 Feet Up at the time. And we decided, okay, we'll go see the Golden Gate Bridge. We took a cab to the opposite side of the bridge and he dropped us off. We kind of walked around there. And then we realized, okay, to get back, no cabs would come and pick us up because they get a lot of like phony phone calls and they drive all the way out there and then there's no one there. So we're like, okay, I guess we're going to have to walk across the bridge, which the bridge it does have a walking path all along one side. It has a biking path on the other side. And so we start on the walking path, but then they had it closed at about a third of the way because they were doing work on the bridge. So you could not walk across.
Oh.
So we're like deciding what to do. I mean, the other option is the bike side, and but there are big signs that say no walkers. Like, okay, what are we going to do? And some random guy on a bike, like a hippie type guy, came by and was like, oh yeah, just walk across, you'll be fine. So we walked across and got yelled at by bikers the entire time. Like, you're not supposed to be over here. Get on the other side. I'm like, can't do it. And of course, you can't talk to them and explain the situation because they're just zipping by. But we walked across and made it and eventually got back to the conference. I think we walked about 3 miles.
Wow. That is a pretty impressive bridge. I remember seeing it as a kid. That's a long way to be walking, especially with crazed cyclists not being.
It was really neat to walk across. I wouldn't mind doing it again on the correct side next time.
I remember when we were in Tokyo, and there was discussion of what was going to happen the next year on the board, because I think at that time there was discussion about who should be the next president, and it sounded like Paul didn't really want to keep going, which is good, because in a way it's really good to have people cycle in and out to broaden the pool of to widen the pool of people who are able to do the job. And I remember there was discussion of who that next president could be, and there was like, okay, people were talking about you, and I thought, well, that's kind of cool, because of course it's fun to see someone like you who'd been on the board at that time for like 5 years or something like that to get a chance to run things. Did you have any particular desire to be the president, or is it just like an idea that just seemed like the natural next step?
It was more of a natural next step. It wasn't necessarily a goal of mine. It's like, oh, I'm going to be the president. It's like, no, I'm going to serve on the board.
And that's really the best way to approach, I think, a job like that, as opposed to, I always felt like the people who should get those positions are not the ones who are actively seeking it, because it seems like, okay, that's weird. You almost want to be able to push a person into doing it, because then that they're going to do a good job because they just got given the job, as opposed to they were actively seeking it. Have you've one of the things that you've done is you started the Plone steering circle idea, I think, and I don't know if it was your idea in particular, but can you tell us a little bit more about the concept?
Sure. I mean, I'll attribute that to Jens. I mean, he brought up the idea in the meeting. He put together a lot of the original document. But I mean, we have all worked together to put that completely together and decide, okay, exactly how we want this to work and how we're going to move forward with it. And then decided, okay, this is going to be one of the roles of the president, is also putting those meetings together and getting them organized.
And the purpose of those meetings is to gather team members or team leads?
Yeah, and it's not necessarily the team leads. I mean, Eric Steele at one point was doing a team leaders meeting, just bringing it together, making sure everyone's coordinated. So it's taking that same idea. We're not requiring it to be a team lead, but just someone from each team that can come give a short report out, and then we know what everyone else is doing. It also gives teams a chance to talk to each other. If they hear, oh, and another team's doing this, we need to do this to work with them on that. So it's an opportunity for that. it's very similar. At 6 Feet Up every day, we have a developers meeting, and it's kind of the same idea of making sure everyone's on the same page and working together.
I think it's great to have that kind of communication, because if you don't have it, then people work in isolation maybe feel unappreciated or upset that things are happening that they're not aware of until they find out much later. I think that's a really wonderful idea. Mm-hmm. One of the other things that you've started, or that the board has started, is a conference committee. Is that right? Like kind of a standing conference committee. What's the thinking behind that?
So I know you and Sally kind of started this idea a few years ago. It's just never been like completely established of, having a set of, and basically instructions that can be given to whoever's organizing the conference in person that year. So the committee's job isn't to organize the conference, but to assist the organizers, making sure that they have all of the tools that they need. If they have any questions, and that's who they can ask. Also to help keep the organizers on track. Like we're going to put together a schedule to say, okay, your conference is this date, so you should have your speakers by this date, you should have the schedule by this date, and just help to keep them on track.
Yeah, that was definitely something that we were learning. So when Sally Kleinfeld and Chris Ewing and I were putting together the plans for the 2016 conference, we were kind of looking back and trying to pick the brain of Alec Gika and the Oda Webb team who'd run 2015. And back, which is when we put together the proposal, we were actually on site in Bucharest. And so I was asking Alec, okay, how do you do this? How do you keep track of these things? And when do you do this? And how do you ask for that? And so he gave me a ton of information, which was wonderful. And then funny story, I asked him how he keeps track of all the to-dos, because there's an amazing number of to-dos, tasks to assign to people and see if it was done or not. And he said, oh, I just have this like notepad app on my phone. Here you go. And he's like scrolling through this list of things to do. There's got to be a better way. But the idea of being able to pass on essentially like a playbook of, yeah, here are the things you need to do. Here's the times when those things need to be done by. Here's the lead time you need for putting together a website or whatever. That's a sort of holy grail. I can imagine like if we could just like a cookie cutter template and just like, here you go, here's the conference playbook, go for it. Just fill in the dots and you can do it.
I think there's also a trick to that in being able to hand that over in a way that's not completely overwhelming.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because if you just dumped all of those things on a person, it would be like, I don't think I want to do this.
I have no idea what that's like.
It's so easy, isn't it, Chrissy? I mean, you could do it in a weekend.
It seems like it. And then things keep coming up like, oh, I need to do this. And oh, crap, I need to do that.
No, it's really simple. Anybody could do it. So, okay. I want to hear your best Plone story. Do you have one?
I was trying to think of something. And I mean, really, I just kept going back to the Brazil conference. Sorry, you weren't there. I was talking about this with Erico yesterday. So the hotel where the trainers were staying, next door, it was just a parking lot, but a guy would come and set up in the parking lot every night and grill food. So it was a stick. It had meat on it. He had several different kinds of meat. He had drinks and I think some desserts and stuff, and everything cost the same. I think it was maybe 4 reais. And so, you pick your food, and when you were done, you say, okay, I got 3 things. And it's like, okay, 3 things, 4 reais, 12 reais. And see, there was only a handful of us that went over there the first night. It was during the training, so not everyone had shown up yet. I was hanging out, like I said, with Paul Everett, Luciano Romaglio, and he was the one that we were sitting with, and he knew it was over there. It's like, okay, we'll go over, check it out. It was really good. And then the next night, it was kind of the same thing. We had some more people, and it's like, hey, that guy's over there selling food. Let's go over there again. And so that ended up being, I think, about every night. That's where we had dinner. It was just going over to this parking lot. I was trying to find the picture before this, because I think we were like, some of us, we were just sitting on like 5 gallon tubs turned upside down, just sitting there hanging out and eating.
Nice. You mentioned photography. You take really nice photos, and you've got a Flickr account, and the Plone Foundation Flickr account follows your Flickr account, and I see periodically you take photos of birds out. How did you get started in photography?
So that was part of my major in college. So the instructional technology had some classes in photography. So like one of the required classes was to do black and white photography on film. So I learned the whole process of developing the photos, learning all of the basics about photography through that, shutter speed and aperture and everything. So that's really what got me into it.
Have you thought about giving a show? I mean, you take some really nice photos.
Well, I haven't been doing as much with it recently. I mean, I still take pictures a lot, but like you go look at my Flickr and there's nothing new on there recently, but I'm still taking the pictures. I'm just not necessarily spending the time to make them all public. I did, while I was living in the Indianapolis area, I was part of a camera club there, and we would join different not necessarily a show, but like where you were submitting your photos to be judged, and they were awarded. So I did get some awards. I mean, if you can see this one up here, this was when I had entered in the state fair and got second place.
Okay, I have a story about you. When it was in 2019, and 6 Feet Up had basically organized a 20th anniversary party for 20 years of 6 Feet Up's existence. And we all went down to a place called French Lick in Indiana. It's a resort. It's a huge hotel complex built around a mineral well. It was kind of one of those spas from the early 1900s that was all the rage for health reasons. And one of our first activities at the French Lick Hotel was a scavenger hunt. And I remember we were split up into teams, and you and I happened to end up on the same team.
Well, you were captain, so you picked me.
Oh, is that how that worked?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yes, that is how it's. There's I was going to say madness to my reason, but actually it's the other way around. I remember thinking, if I want to win, I got to have Chrissy on the team, because I could just see other members of the team kind of arguing over what to do, what order to do things in. And I said, let's just give that list to Chrissy and see what she comes up with. And we won. And I remember thinking the whole way, oh my God, I picked right. It was so awesome.
Well, and we had Mary Beth too, who had just she had been there at the resort like a month or two prior. So she knew where a lot of the things were. But yeah, I didn't try to like go down the list. I was like, just spewing everything out, like, okay, here are all the things we need to do. Like as we walked along, like, oh, there it is. Let's go over that way. And
it was more organized than I think it would have been otherwise. But I remember being very proud of myself. Yes. All right. Well, is there anything else you wanted to share with our listeners or viewers? Any kind of cool thoughts you had about Plone, or what you see as future Plone, exciting Volto projects, anything like that going on?
Not that I can think of. I mean, but going back to our conversation talking about Zoop, I mean, it's great to see that we are continuing forward with the Plone community, and we're moving forward, and hopefully what's going to be something that might even be more accessible to more people and be able to get more people into the community. So yeah, I'm really glad to see all of the effort that has been happening in the community to push everything forward.
Thanks, Chrissy. Again, we were talking to Chrissy Wainwright, who's the Plone Foundation Board President for her second term and a senior developer at 6 Feet Up, a stalwart at 6 Feet Up. And I'm so very happy to have her as my colleague. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.